I made a video game. It started out like this, but it came out like this. In the immortal words of the Killers, how did it end up like this? Well, let's talk game design. Oh, and Mr. Brightside absolutely still slaps, by the way. So to keep my productivity up, I decided to enter a game jam. For those of you who don't know, a game jam is a timed event where lots of people all make a game at the same time, usually around a central theme, or with certain limitations. They're a great way to get used to finishing stuff, which, if you're a budding game developer, is one of your biggest challenges, right next to paying the rent and getting enough sleep. Itch.io has a convenient list of all ongoing game jams, so I headed over there to browse through them and found this one, hosted by Miziziziz. He's a game developer and YouTuber who has a popular video series where 4 developers, by invitation, make games from the same set of art assets. And that's what this jam is about. All entrants working from one art pack. That's perfect for me because graphics are my Achilles heel. I can get a game up and running in minutes, but it will always look awful because when life was handing out art skills, I was in the queue to get a double helping of sarcasm instead, which worked out so well for me. Looking over the art provided, I had 2 immediate thoughts. 1, Jesus Christ, that's a lot of art, where do I even begin? And 2, there's going to be so many procedurally generated roguelike dungeon crawlers. If there's one thing solo developers love, it's a procedurally generated roguelike dungeon crawler. I immediately decided to make a procedurally generated roguelike. No, I didn't. What I was inspired to do came from a game I've been playing recently, Metal Gear Solid, on the Game Boy Color. This is a top-down isometric stealth game in the style of the old NES and MSX series Origins, and I liked the simplicity that was still able to capture some of the tension of its 3D big brothers. So I got to work on a basic top-down stealth game starring this thing. Is it a bunny? Or a mouse? Or a potato? Who knows? Point is, it's cute, and I thought I could leverage the cuteness to make something that would be endearing through visuals alone. This went quite well. I got a cave, some lighting, a system with keys and doors, and this enemy. Pay attention because this is going to be important. The enemy has a vision cone. If you've played Metal Gear Solid, you'll recognise the vision cone from the Soliton radar in the top right corner. It gives the player information about where they can and can't go at that moment, representing the line of sight of the various patrolling guards and security cameras. What I decided to do is attach it directly to the enemies, so that rather than planning out a route through a huge chunk of the level, the player could think on the fly about where it was safe to stand. If you happen to get spotted by an enemy, this happened. Snake! Snake! And here's where things get weird. I was making this on Saturday. This particular jam has a time limit of 48 cumulative hours, which meant I could work on it bit by bit over the week, rather than having to get it all done in a weekend. That meant I thought I'd get the basics done, then just do bits here and there as I felt like it to avoid burnout. Having landed the basics, I did what most game developers do, and started procrastinating. I opened up Twitter and thought I'd share my progress using the jam's hashtag, and I thought the best way of showing it off was to show my main character, who I'd spontaneously named Pancake for no particular reason other than it sounded cute, getting eaten. I later sent this tweet to a friend of mine so she could see what I was working on, and what she said changed everything. She said, "Is it like Pac-Man, but you're an evil skull named Pancake?" Now, clearly it wasn't, and clearly you weren't, but this caused one of those breakthrough lightbulb moments, and I realised that playing as the skull, whose name was now Pancake, had the potential to be much more fun. I mentioned earlier about how I expected most of the entries to come back with a procedurally generated roguelike dungeon crawler. This was mostly a joke, please don't get offended, but also feeds into some thoughts that I'd had about originality, especially in game jams. Although my original idea would have been just fine, it wasn't as original as what if you were the bad guy for once eating everybody. So I came across a teachable moment. Pivot. Sometimes, as a designer, you'll have a strong and solid plan that you want to enact. That is mostly good, especially if you're working in a large team and need to coordinate everybody to be moving in the same direction. But it doesn't hurt to be open to the idea that maybe the real essence of the game you're making lies somewhere else. Mark, over at Game Maker's Toolkit, did a video on this literally this week, in an example of incredibly good timing, and talks about how it's a good idea sometimes to follow the fun. If you stumble across something that might be more fun than the thing you're doing, don't be afraid to at least try it out, and give your game the opportunity to essentially design itself. So I pivoted. You now controlled Pancake, a bouncy skull with the ability to eat people, and the idea ballooned from there. Over the course of the week, I expanded to include human enemies all based on RPG character tropes who would be invading Pancake's dungeon and would need eating. There's the Knight, who I coloured blue, and soon realised that what I'd actually made was Shovel Knight, who will try and walk up to you and hit you with a sword. There's the archer who skirts around and fires arrows in your general direction. There's the wizard who sends out a circular wave of magic balls. And then there's this guy. In-game, he's known as the moron. He's basically cannon fodder, something to round out the numbers for player satisfaction. I had a real problem getting the movement sorted and went through a few ideas that mostly involved the mouse. Eventually I scrapped it and went to a simple arrow key system instead. And when I did, I realised something. I'd kept the levels very compact, and the number of enemies was finite from the start, meaning they wouldn't be spawning in regular intervals, and that what you see is what you'll have to deal with. When you die, you can restart immediately at the same level that you were on, with absolutely no penalty and no delay. What I realised was, this is basically Hotline Miami. If you've never played Hotline Miami, it's a stylish top-down sort of shooter that's brutally hard but also very fast. So it keeps player frustration down because you don't have very long to be mad about dying, and that's the essence of the primary gameplay loop that I'd made. Now, Hotline Miami has a very specific 80s aesthetic, with glowy pinks everywhere, and it works really well, so I decided I also needed an aesthetic. And that is how we arrived at where we are. A fast-paced demon skull bouncing around dungeon rooms, eating people, while disco lights strobe across the floor and funky music plays in the background. I'm reasonably happy with it because it's finished. The primary gameplay loop is pretty satisfying, and if you want more information on why I keep talking about the primary gameplay loop, you should watch my previous video. Now obviously it's a GameJam game, so it's not very deep or varied, but it is finished, which is fine. If I was taking it further, there's a lot I'd need to do. I did have this idea that what you'd actually do was work your way out of the dungeon, through the forest, to the town that the adventurers came from, where you'd eat everybody including the king and then marry the queen and take over, but I didn't have time. For now, you can go and play it if you want, the link's in the description, and if you found this video interesting, helpful or entertaining, then please do leave a like on it. If you didn't, then leave a dislike, and if you'd like to see more videos of this nature, then obviously click subscribe and ring that bell, because this is basically what I do. And I'll see you next time I feel like saying, hey, let's talk game design.